Welcome to the InStory Show. I'm Devorah Spilman, your host, and today I am thrilled to welcome Jodeen Bergstrom. Hi, Jodeen.
Hey, good to have you on, or have me on here. I appreciate it.
So before we dive in, I just want to tell you a little bit. Jodeen is a leadership mentor and an expert in the whole concept of the book of Think and Grow Rich and how do you lead a mastermind and turn that into being a master of manifestation, let's just say. And so we're going to, just like everybody else, I want to dive in with your story as a child, and then you're going to kind of lead us through to what you're up to now. So yes, tell us a little bit about your life when you were a kid.
Well, Devorah, first of all, I want to say thank you. I really appreciate you allowing me into your tribe, and I hopefully can add value to everyone. And my childhood started out, I'm the youngest of 6 children. I am the baby, and of course, I had my daddy wrapped around my pinky. I was his little girl. But I grew up on a farm, and I don't know if a lot of you understand the work ethics of farmers, but I didn't realize as a child like that you hired out for like electricians or plumbers or any of those, needed contract workers, because my dad just did everything. And with that, he really taught me how to do everything. But at the same time, when you're out in the fields and you're working on the tractors and whatnot, especially I started, at the age of like 3 or 4, riding around in the tractor with my dad and sleeping, in the cab with him. And he was my caretaker while my mom worked off the farm a lot of times as a teacher. But that allowed me a lot of time to dream. There was several rock piles and rocks throughout the farm acreage that I would just kind of use them my imagination. That's where I created my imagination, and I would use those kind of as my base. And I had a huge rock one that was in the back of my parents' yard, or the pasture, that was all fenced in. But I would climb under the fence and I would lay on this rock, and I would just lay there and look up at the clouds. And all of a sudden I realized that the clouds had pictures in them. And so I would find different objects within the clouds. One time I saw Snoopy on ice skates, and like I was the only one that saw it, nobody else could see it. But I mean, it was a full-fledged, I swear to God, Snoopy was like ice skating up in the clouds. And so, but that allowed me to dream and realize that, even though I was 10 miles out, it was hard for me to have friends over because I'm 10 miles out in the country, and my closest neighbor was like 3.5 miles away. And so it wasn't like I had friends over. And so, Susan was my imaginary friend, and she played with me all the time, and just really learned to be a dreamer because of the fact that I was allowed to, have that downtime and that experience of sitting out on the hot rocks and enjoying the country life, even though I was a child and helping farming. So that's kind of, my childhood of starting my dreaming process, so to speak.
What strikes me as so cool about that is how much people endeavor to teach us how to get back to that. Like telling us you need to get out in nature, you need to have downtime, you need to just be quiet and let your mind open and flow. And here, as a child, any child given half a chance will do that.
Exactly.
Right? Like it's our natural ability is to see the wonder in the world. And you are not the only one on this interview series with an imaginary friend. I mean, and many people will say those imaginary friends were real.
They were.
Meaning they were spirit guides that nobody understood what the heck to call them. One of the women I interviewed, she said she saw them all the time, and she thought everybody did.
Well,
it wasn't until she was 11 and her family said, well, who are you talking to? And so that whole idea of being able to
did I lose you?
Nope, you're there, you're back. And that whole idea of being able to dream bigger is a very powerful idea. And for a lot of people, that got shut down. So I'm kind of curious, like that whole ability to dream big, Did you keep that with you, or did you have to shut it down?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. As a child, I didn't know that there was, that everybody else didn't have imaginary friends. Cause like you said, that's what I grew up with. And so, just like not knowing, that that an electrician was supposed to come and change, to wire your electrical house. I didn't know that because my dad, and, even another side of that I always tell people, it wasn't until I went to college that I realized that you could buy spaghetti sauce in a jar, because my mom had a garden the size of the football field, and we were self-sufficient. And
Wow.
so I always, we always made our own spaghetti sauce. And so my college roommate was like, let's make spaghetti. So I'm like looking for tomatoes and celery and, all these ingredients, only to find out that you could buy spaghetti sauce in a jar. That's how naive I was, and it was because we were self-sufficient. Farmers are, I was sharing with you a little bit earlier. A friend of mine noted that North Dakota is one of the hardest working states in the United States. And, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Because we're so self-sufficient. We have that loyalty to the land, and that leaving that legacy. And, I grew up being self-sufficient, and, my dad taught me how to change a tire and how to change my own oil. And, I could take apart a tractor within minutes and take the part, and, I negotiated. That's where my negotiation skills started, because he would send me to the parts store, and I would argue with the guy that, no, we didn't pay that much last time. So, I'm only giving you this amount. And Dad goes, well, that was a different part, but you saved us $200. So that's a good thing, So, it was an amazing experience. At the time, was I angry? Was I resentful? Yes, because I was a teenager. I was, I didn't want to be out, like my summer was summer following. I was in a tractor, in a cab with, a crappy old radio and a bag of sunflower seeds, going around and around and around. And if I wanted to go anywhere, that had to be done. There wasn't any, well, okay, you didn't get it done, you can go. It was like, you can't go until that's done, and the other thing, we had animals. So, you fed, and that's where that hardest working, people in the United States, it's 40 below. You still got to go out and start the tractor and feed the cows, because they depend on you.
Wow.
You don't have an option. And if
Wow.
it's 85 below, you're out there making it work, because, they depend on you. So
Wow.
I think, that work ethic, and you work hard, but then you also learn how to dream with it as well. So there's kind of a balance there. So I think that's part of why I became a dreamer, is because I didn't want to stay in that tractor, even though I wanted to farm, and I asked my dad to have the farm, and he said, no way, you can't have that. And it kind of pissed me off, because it's like, don't tell me I can't have something, so I strive to make sure that my kids were raised on a farm. When our youngest was about 7, we did buy land, and, got them into 4-H, and they all grew up, with that responsibility of taking care of animals. And I just think the morals and the ethics that are derived from that environment are very healthy. And I wanted to make sure that my kids receive that. So we have 5 daughters, and all of them have had that. And I'm grateful and proud that we were able to do that.
I love that. And, I think that people don't understand like how much you can learn from each different person's life experience. And so how are you taking some of what you've learned from the farm forward into your work with the whole book? Like, how did you get connected to the whole book, Think and Grow Rich, and that whole body of work that you now teach? I want to kind of hear that was not your farmer story so much.
Well, and actually, and it's funny, because I didn't have good guidance when I, came out of high school. I didn't have a counselor that said, well, you would be good this. Like I remember my aptitude test, it said I could either be a drill sergeant, a welder, or what was the other thing? There was like, I don't know, underwater, pipeline, something or other, it was like crazy. It was just like, none of them were like, I'm like, what is that? And so the only thing I knew is my mom had a garden the size of a football field. So she would plant like one time she had 3,000 tomato plants in the ground. She was just a wild woman, but that was her summer job. She was a teacher during this, you know, as teacher's aide. So she was in the school system during the winter time, but in the summertime, that was her full-time job. So I grew up peddling tomatoes and jellies and jams and, you know, going to the craft shows, going to the farmer's market, you know, I mean, and I just felt that that's what the rest of the world, I didn't realize that people actually signed up to 9 to 5 because, you know, we work from sun up to sundown. Like in North Dakota, the sun doesn't go down until like 11 o'clock. And so it was the norm for us to be eating at midnight and going to bed at 1 o'clock and getting up at, you know, 7 o'clock and starting all over again. I just thought that that's the rest of the world did that. When I moved to Colorado and the sun went down at 8 o'clock, I'm like, what is going on? You know, we've got 4 more hours. How, you know, we got to turn on the lights, you know, and it was just like, I can't work outside. So, you know, it was kind of naive, but when I went to college, I knew I wanted to have a greenhouse in retirement. And I didn't really think about what I was going to do in between. So I went into flower shop and greenhouse management because I knew that that was something that I wanted to do. And so when I was in that course, it was around January, we were going to the Western Stock Show, and it was 85 below 3 nights in a row. And a week later, we were in Denver and it was 55 above. And so I looked at my advisor as we were literally on the balcony of the state capitol in Denver, looking out at how beautiful it was. It was 55 above, knowing that we had just, you know, we actually got stormed in South Dakota because of the roads closing down. So I was like, jokingly said, hey, is there any way I could do my work study here in Colorado? And to my amazement, she's like, actually, you can. And I'm like, what? Are you serious? And she's like, yeah, she had worked at a dude ranch as a head gardener and she knew the couple. And so she called them up, and that was in January. And in April, by April 15th, I had moved down to Denver and was a head gardener at this dude ranch doing my work study. So that was my escape from North Dakota and the hardworking state. And I got exposed to the mountains and I loved it. So I made the decision that I wanted to stay there. And so I ended up going up to Breckenridge, Colorado. And I worked for the little flower shop. I ran a flower shop in Breckenridge, Colorado. And then and then I met my husband and we got married. And I realized that I wanted to be in charge of my own life. I, you know, had done that 9 to 5 and it sucked. I didn't like it. Even though I was a manager and I still had some control, I still didn't have control of my life. And so we were getting ready to have kids. And I was like, I don't want to be somebody else to raise my kid, because part of the story, I was sexually abused as a child and I didn't want that to happen to my child. So I wanted to make sure I could protect her. And so I started up my own flower shop. And with that, we got involved in network marketing. We were exposed. One of our clients was a diamond within Amway or Quick Star. And he was my first mentor. And Jim handed me the book, Think and Grow Rich. And he said, this is your Bible, especially if you're in business. He goes, you need to, know what this is all about. And so literally I took that book and applied it, and a lot of the success principles that I, had been applying to my life all of a sudden made sense. The tenacity, the persistence. One thing as a baby daughter, you are very persistent in getting your way with daddy sometimes. And so, it just was a natural leadership thing that just kind of fell into place. And so that was my first exposure to Think and Grow Rich. And very, very grateful for that mentor to hand me that book. And I wish now, hindsight, over 50, we wish that we would have, applied more of it throughout, but I wasn't able to, be consistent in it like I should have been. I did refer to it a lot, but I wish I would have, really grabbed onto it more. But either way, I built 3 successful businesses from the ground up, made them into the $1 million avenue and revenue. And I raised 5 daughters that are very beautiful and successful, and have a lot of tenacity and maybe a little bit too much of me sometimes, but very, very grateful for that. So that was my first exposure to Think and Grow Rich.
Well, and you know what I think is really cool is that you have re-entered the whole world of the power of what that book does. And I've heard other people talk about how it's very hard to just read that book without having a mastermind, without having a mentor. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about sort of how that's one of, there's a lot of success principles, but maybe you can pull out a couple of them, and one of them being the mastermind. Because I remember hearing somebody else talking about how they talked about the secret in there, and what he said was knowing what you want, like really having a strong desire, and then having this mastermind group. And I had such a funny realization recently when listening to someone talk about it. I thought, you know, when you get a small group of people who are very visionary and they're connected to each other, you activate the mastermind, meaning you get connected to God. And for some reason, I had never thought of it like that. It was just one of those obvious things. The mastermind is used so much in so many ways that I had stopped paying attention to actually what happens when you get people putting this kind of high energy connection together. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about your experience with that, since that's a big part of what you do.
Right. Well, I think the big thing is I had read the book Think and Grow Rich and listened to it on the audio, but I think where the aha moment or the true essence of the book is when, like you said, bringing those like-minded people together with that definite purpose in mind. And, you know, a couple things I want to just note on here. Oprah is very well known for her involvement in The Secret. And, you know, it's interesting because as I'm rebranding and getting ready to put out a 17-week mastermind on Think and Grow Rich, I was showing some pictures of you know, of my brand to a group. And it was interesting because they were like, what's the connection of, you know, because I have a lot of rocks and stones, and it's more on the emotional part versus the financial part. So they were like, what's the connection there? And I thought it was interesting because, you know, in my early 20s and 30s, when I was grabbing onto the book, it was about the green, it was about the money, it was about the financial. And now as I'm over 50, going back to that book, it's more in the spiritual, it's more in the relationship. And, you know, my parents passed away 2.5 years ago at 90 and 91 years old. They're, you know, on their deathbed. I mean, I followed that whole transition of them, you know, leaving this earth. It wasn't about the money. In fact, my mom wished she didn't have the money. It was, she wanted the relationships. That was the most valuable part. It was the memories. And so I thought it was interesting how that kind of gave me an aha moment. It was like, I had been drawn to my branding of more, you know, on the emotional and spiritual part of it. And, you know, like Oprah says, you know, get to God, however that is, if it's Gandhi, if it's the Lord, you know, whatever that is, you know, get there. And at first I thought, well, that's kind of hypocritical. I'm a Christian, I can't be saying that. But no, once you understand spirituality, it doesn't matter, you know, how you speak to them. You know, like we all don't resonate with the color of red, but yet some people, that is their vibrant and that's their energy. So we're all different. So how can we say there's only one God and everybody needs to speak to that one God? And it's not about the God, it's the spiritual guidance. And however that is, and, you know, it's interesting because I've raised very strong Christians, and now that I'm, you know, and I've always, I love God and the spirituality, but I'm not religious. And what I mean by that, I feel the structure of a church conforms people. It gets people to not really experience the whole spirituality thing. And, you know, one of my daughters, when I started talking about channeling and going a little, because I've done virtual live summits on energy and spiritual healers. And she goes, well, isn't that hypocritical or going against your beliefs? And I was like, when you get to that level of understanding spirituality, and it was interesting because a Lutheran church, a pastor came into the spiritual healing group of mine and said, I want to apologize to all of you. And I was like, what? And she said, you guys have been doing the work and calling at a higher level than any minister out there. You understand the spiritual level of it. And she goes, I want to apologize for my leader, you know, my fellow pastors, for degrading you and cutting you down, because the reality is you're doing a much better job than what we are. And you understand it at a higher level. And we've been conformed to this box thinking that this is the way you need to do it. But once you open up and you understand spirituality and the energy and the vibrations, and that's what the secret's talking about. And Oprah, that's part of what her message was, get to God, however it is. And, now after I get it, I understand what she's saying. So
I agree. Look, I completely agree with you. Like, I'm like a religious Jew. I'm like a pretty observant Jew. And I say, I'm religious, Jewish, and woo-woo and proud. It's like both. Like, woo-woo and proud, I admit it. But I keep a very traditional Jewish Sabbath. And I feel often, I talk about how the ground under my feet is my tradition. Like my Jewish teachings and tradition, that's the faith that gives me a ground under my feet. But I don't stand there and say, you have to stand on that ground too. Right? Like that, like you can have your own story. It's one of the things I've been talking about a lot lately, like what is the story that you live by? So God can be one and have many names and many garments and all of that. And I think that's part of, so great you're talking about it. Part of it is for us to own our authentic story and not have to live somebody else's story they told you had to live before. So I think that's part of what you're bringing out is that this is part of it. And I talk about integration a lot too. So that bringing everything together. And all right, so take us a few more steps into this world of Think and Grow Rich and the mastermind, and how is it helping you now with this higher vibrational work?
Well, and I think the big thing too is when you talk about Think and Grow Rich, you can read the book, but until you've brought like-minded people together that want to, improve the world, that's my whole goal, is for all of us to make the world a better place. And I think that when you bring those like-minded people together, the synergy that is created, we talk about the mastermind, and going back to that childhood, having those imaginary friends. That is part of the success principles that Napoleon Hill speaks about. Even though, like for me, being remote, like I am 42 miles from the Canadian border. I'm 58 miles from the Montana border, and I'm 82 miles to the closest Starbucks. So like I am in the middle of nowhere. And the other side of that is I grew up here. I moved away. I got exposure to bigger and better things. And when I moved back, the small mindedness is still here. And that, I don't really resonate with a lot of, my older friends, or I never really connected and made a strong support system here because I was always a mom. I was a caretaker for my parents for the last 10 years. I was, a wife, and I was all this busyness. So I didn't, really make connection, but I always had imaginary counsels. Like, one of my counsels is Warren Buffett. He, I speak to him when I'm trying to figure out financial things. Tony Robbins, I always, because of the relationships. And so I have this imaginary counsel that I bring in as my mentors, and call me crazy. I don't care. But it works for me. And if you don't want to try it, that's okay too. But I challenge you, like Oprah, if she is a mentor to you, and I don't know why I'm bringing her up so much today, but, if she's a mentor, then, have her on her imaginary counsel, because she can speak to you. She can give you guidance. And if you don't get that vibration, and we're all energy, and if you don't understand that, you're missing out on a lot. And you're probably not even going to be on this listening to this anymore already. But if you do, those people, that energy, the knowledge that you need is there. You just have to ask for it. I can give you a perfect example of how this works out. I unfortunately have greedy siblings and jealousy. And so even though my parents have passed away, there's still been ugliness. And so I had my siblings taking me to court. And so about a year and a half ago, my husband walked out after 33 years. So like I'm literally on my own. And so with that, here I am, lost my parents, shut down my business. My ex-husband walked out on me. And I have siblings that are, taking me to court. And so I'm financially, and plus all the responsibility was on me. So I was trying to find a lawyer to take on my court case. And I was like, I was struggling because they wanted $20,000 and, to take onto my case, and it was just like, it just wasn't happening. And so I had represented myself. I, gotten to the point where I had the court hearing was coming up and it was within 24 hours. And so finally I just, threw my hands up in the air and I said, Mom, Dad, higher spirit. I said, I need you to find me the ideal lawyer. And I was like, I had been calling lawyers and trying to figure out, another way that I could at least get somebody to represent me in the court system. So I threw that out there and I had made a phone call to one of the lawyers and she said, try to, find a bigger lawyer, a group. So because then at least you could have somebody representing you in court. So I was like, okay. So I called this one and had a conversation with them. And this is at 3:00 in the afternoon. All of a sudden I get a phone call and, the lawyer comes on and says, I am, so-and-so, I can help you with your court tomorrow. And I was like, are you sure? I said, isn't that a conflict of interest? What it was actually the lawyer that my mom and dad had used to divide up the trust fund that they'd put together. And I didn't reach out to him because I thought he was a conflict of interest. And literally at 4:00, he put into the court system that he was my lawyer. I went into the courtroom at 10:00 and he nailed it. He won the case hands down. And the thing he said to me, he goes, I'm very well diverse in your case. I know your siblings well. In fact, they had tried to get him disbarred. That's how obscene my siblings are. And so like he had a personal investment because like they didn't make it, he didn't get disbarred, but he made it complicated for them. So, I mean, it was like literally when I said the perfect lawyer, I didn't envision him because I thought he was a conflict of interest, but it wasn't in this case. And he took me on and we won. So when you give your power to the universe, when you ask for it, like I had been trying for, the case had been going on for 6 months. I'd been trying to find a lawyer for 6 months. When I released it and said, give me the perfect lawyer, literally, he's the only lawyer that could have walked in within a 24-hour period and kicked ass like he did.
And I love that story because it's also that whole story of getting back up. Because a lot of what I find inspiring in the speakers on the series and the women I speak with is that we have this wisdom to offer because we have figured out all these different ways of getting back up. Like all this stuff just happened to you and you said, that's okay, I'm getting back up and here's what I'm going to do. And so I think it's such an example of embodying what you teach. So tell us a little bit about your free gift, because I know you have some kind of an experience of this mastermind thing that's going to be amazing for people. So tell us a little bit about your free gift so people can dive into this a little more.
Well, the big thing is like I've noted to you, you can read the book and you can listen to the book, but until you experience a deep dive of the mastermind, you really don't have the knowledge that is presented in this book. And so with that, I want to give to your group a 7-day free mastermind where they can come in and we're going to go over the chapters. And I'm not going to tell you which chapters it is because it depends on what our group synergy is and where we need the most help. So I will, kind of give some interviews as to far as I can tell you, first of all, we will work on persistence because as entrepreneurs, persistency is the death of any entrepreneur. If they're not persistent, they're not going to make it. So that is a one given chapter. And a lot of times I cover desire, because if you don't have that definiteness of, sorry about that. If I don't have that definiteness of purpose and desire, it can really mess with you. So if we have clarity on those two, I can assure you that those will be 2 of the chapters that we're covered, but I don't know what the other ones will be, just because I want to see where it works with everybody.
What would be really cool is if you address a little bit about how do you trust this higher counsel concept? Like this book was written in the 30s and you can't get more woo-woo than some of the stuff he says in there. It's so out there and it's from such a long time ago. And I love that so much. But even though he said this and it was known so long ago, it's not taught. It's bizarrely not taught. And so I would love for you to just remind people that this is another area that you can gain strength is and this is a big part of my mission too, is how do you trust that other realm? How do you trust that other kind of support and knowing and we call it we call it all different things, and it doesn't really matter what you call it, but it is this other way of getting support, help, guidance, information, manifestation, all of that. So I hope you'll just at least give people some tools for tapping into and trusting that, because I think it's such a big piece of what will help us so much.
Well, there's actually 2 chapters in the book that are relevant to what you're speaking of. The first one is the sixth sense. And I can tell you my biggest frustration, I have been gifted with trusting my instincts, and they've always, followed through with me. Perfect example, just real quick story on that is my daughter was about 13 years old and wanted to go with some friends to Williston. It's about an hour away. And I just had that gut feeling. I was like, no, you can't do that today, and I wasn't home, and she was calling me. And so she called about 4 or 5 times. And finally, the last time somebody had called in and said they were sick. And I was like, no, you need to go into work. I'm sorry. I can't let you do that today. That evening, when we got home, the sheriff came into my establishment. The people that she wanted to go with were 3 employees of ours. They had been killed in a car accident that day.
Oh.
And
No.
I literally fell to my knees when the sheriff came in to tell me that. And knowing in that split second that my life could have forever been changed had I not listened to my instincts. And we all know a teenager can be pretty persistent, and but I just had that gut feeling, and I was just, and then when the universe provided somebody to be sick so that she had to go in and work to get that story across and that decision across, I was so grateful. But when you trust your instincts, when you have that gut feeling, you've got to act on that. This last 2.5 years, I was really angry with myself because I lost that ability. I was suffering from sorrow and depression and, all the pity party that I was in. I wasn't listening to that sixth sense. So that is a chapter that we deep dive into and understand where that gut feeling is, where that sixth sense is, and listening to those higher powers. And that ties into the spirituality and the vibration as well. So
yeah. Super cool. I love it so much, and I love how you just shared your story. And it's okay when life hits us and knocks us down, we can get back up. So So everybody, click the link, get Jodeen's free gift, and join the mastermind. Share in the Facebook group how does it, what's your story? How is this affecting? What does it make you think about? Because we will jump in and support you. So just as we wrap up, leave us, Jodeen, with a couple of last thoughts.
Well, the first thing I want to tell everybody is we all have the highs and we all have the lows. And a lot of times when in those valleys, we want to, have other people save us. And that's unfortunately what I did. I was throwing out the life jacket, expecting everybody to pull me up. You have to understand, nobody has that power. We have the power within ourselves to make things work. And we're the only one that can do that work. So if you're sitting in a pity party like I was for 2.5 years, get off of it, get out there and understand you have all the answers. They're there. You just have to believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else is going to. And, I reach out. If you are in that dump, I will help you get out of it, because I want everyone to understand that there's so much more out there. And I know when we have those foggy glasses on, we don't believe that. But I want you to take that belief and trust in me and Devorah, because it's like it is there for us. We have it, and we just need to grab onto it and make it work. And there's a certain part of tenacity when you make a decision that you want to do something. You just got to make it. You plan A, B, and if you got to get to X, Y, and Z, you got to do it. And I've done that. I went all the way through the alphabet, going, what the hell? Why is this not working?
Well, and also eventually what the whole point of the mastermind is that you have to have that inner drive, but you don't have to do it alone.
Right. And
this
the other
thing.
Right. The other thing with a mastermind is you got to understand there's a misuse of masterminds out there right now. There's a lot of gurus that are talking about masterminds, and they get then on their platform and they speak nothing about themselves, and they're on their preaching. but that's not what a true mastermind is. I am a guider. I'm a leader. I'm just there to facilitate the book and the knowledge. I don't, I mean, I share stories, but it's about you guys. When you guys jump in, it's a mastermind about you, not me. I can share my experiences and I can, give guidance and my thoughts, but that's not what a mastermind is. A mastermind's about you, allowing you to express your experience, or maybe some of you, if you're an introvert and you just want to listen, and then when you finally speak, we allow you to speak, and then we're going to be able to give a perception. If we have anywhere from 10 to 25 people in the group, you have a perception of 25 different people that just listen to what you said, and they have a different viewpoint than what your experience is. And you get that aha moment of like, wow, I didn't think of that. Really? That's what it's, it's an awakening experience, because all of a sudden it's not you learning from other people, it's you learning about yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So excited you're doing this for us, Jodeen. It's so great. And everybody go click her link. Join us in the Facebook group. Jodeen, thank you so much for sharing your story, your vision, your own, enthusiasm and tenacity with us.
Well, it's been an honor, and I greatly, greatly appreciate you, allowing me to come in and speak to your group. And I just want to add value. And if there's any way that I can serve any of you, please reach out. And I am grateful for the friendship and our connection that we've made. It's been fun collaborating with you. And I feel, very grateful that the universe has brought you into my circle, and look forward to continuing that and making things, like I said, making the world a better place to live for all of us.
Exactly. And as I say to everybody in farewell, remember to go out in the world, share your story, live your purpose, and be a blessing. Bye, folks.
See you guys. Thanks again.